So thank you very much for having me, Jan, Haro, Sarah, Lucas, the whole team, the interpreters for interpreting me. I think I should have a clicker. Yeah. Thank you. So I wanted to start today. I'm going to talk about quality from a creativity perspective. And I'm very happy to be here because all the research that I will show has been funded by the European Union, so by all of you. So it's nice to come and show you the results of the research that we have carried out in the last 5 years. So the first thing I wanted to start, because the conference is about quality matters, so with 2 definitions of quality by I think some of the people in the room, Alan, I'm looking at you, and in this, so translation scholars, and they give 2 definitions. One is the broad definition of quality, which says that a quality translation demonstrates accuracy and fluency, of course, according to a specification, and to meet the end user needs. And they call this the broad. And then there is the narrow, which is in a way longer, broader, that says that a high-quality translation is the one in which the message embodied in the source text is transferred completely to the target culture so that the native speakers of that culture have the same experience as the readers of the source text. I think the research that I'm going to talk about aligns more with this definition, although contrary to the paper, I believe that maybe the narrow is the broader and the broad is the narrower, and I will explain why when I talk a little bit about creativity. So, in line with the beautiful exhibition about Alice in Wonderland, I wanted to make you work a little bit. So I'm going to show you a text to be able to explain how the instruments that we use in research to analyze creativity. So I have chosen a very small text from Through the Looking Glass, where Alice asks Humpty Dumpty about a poem that appears in the beginning. And then you're going to vote for one Spanish translation, and I chose Spanish because I thought it's not only my native language, but I thought a lot of you could vote for that language. And it doesn't matter if this is not empirical research, so you can vote even if you have an intuition for the translation that you like the best. So this is the text. That's enough to begin with. Humpty Dumpty interrupted. There are plenty of hard words there. Brillig means 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the time when you begin broiling things for dinner. So if you look at this, there are certain parts that I, as a translator, have marked because I think they might cause problems when I have to translate. They will make me think a little bit creatively how to render that in my mother tongue. So now I will give you these 3 translations. So if you don't have a Slido, this is the training part. You're all going to have to vote in a Slido. So first, this is the first translation. Es suficiente para empezar, interrumpió Humpty Dumpty. Hay muchas palabras difíciles ahí. Brillig significa las 4 de la tarde, la hora en que se empieza a asar la comida para la cena. The second one. Con esto basta para empezar, interrumpió Humpty Dumpty, que ya tenemos aquí un montón de palabras difíciles. Eso de que brumeaba negro el sol quiere decir que ya eran las 4 de la tarde, porque es cuando se encienden las brasas para asar la cena. And the third one, poor interpreters here, sorry about this. And the third one, con eso basta para empezar, interrumpió Humpty Dumpty. Ahí tienes suficientes palabras difíciles. Brillig quiere decir las 4 de la tarde, la hora en que uno empieza a poner las cosas al fuego para la cena. So now it's your turn. Vote 1, 2, or 3 in Slido. And if I thank you for showing. So it's between C, B, a lot of B, a lot of B, a lot of B. Very nice. Okay. So I think we start getting an idea that a lot of you are going for B. So going back to my presentation, let's say that B has won. So how do we measure that? Why I think maybe some of you have voted for B. So let me give you some definitions of what creativity means in psychology. And based on these definitions, we have created a framework. This is the standard definition of creativity that is one of the most cited, actually, articles in this Journal of Psychology, that says that creativity requires both originality and effectiveness. Originality means new, but effectiveness means appropriate for that particular context. So, as you were saying, a hallucination might be new, but might not be appropriate. Therefore, it's not creative, but it is new. Creativity also, according to others, is the generation of a product that is judged to be novel. And this is important because here we have the three elements that I might talk to you about today that we have done in research. You have the product, what do the creations need, but they don't work in isolation. They depend on the people that judge this. And people change through time. And this might also change our concept of what is creative. Maybe in the future, AI is considered to be creative. Runco, by the way, has published a new updated version on artificially creativity. And I think this is very interesting because it talks about other aspects of the creative process that I will be talking to you today as well. So what we do is that we take this concept of originality and we say we mark the source text with units of creative potential, similarly to the exercise that we did before, and we call this UCPs. And then we look at the target text, so the translation that I showed to you in Spanish, and we decide if these target translations are creative shifts, so something that departs from the source, that is new, or reproductions, something that follows the source text. A reproduction is not necessarily wrong, but it's not departing from the source text. Our annotation is a bit more complicated than this, but for time's sake, I need to shorten this a little bit. So here, in the Humpty Dumpty paragraph, you see here the units of creative potential that we have annotated. There is more in-depth annotation, but there will be 4 in these 45 words. So then, with the translation that won, that I had no doubt that you were going to vote for, we have to decide then, are these creative shifts or reproductions? So this is the translation by Jaime de Ojeda. There are 12 translations of Through the Looking Glass in Spanish, which is beautiful, because that also talks about time and how things are updated, and maybe not in AI that fast, but that's another topic. So we also measure this effectiveness or appropriateness with a traditional tool, errors. And of course, there is the MQM typology of errors that we use a lot. So we look at the accuracy, fluency, and other things, and we also give kudos to good solutions. So this is why I think maybe the broad is the narrow, in a way, because in our definition, accuracy and fluency, which was the main thing for the broad, are included in our measurement of creativity, in the broad, in my view, of what creativity is. So we came up with a formula, of course, because I wanted to put together creativity and errors, originality and effectiveness. And then we calculate the creative shifts in all the units, in this case that we saw 4, and we subtract the error points divided by the number of words in this case, 45. We multiply all this by 100 just to have a nice number. So in this example, let's say for those of you that speak Spanish, that we have two very noticeable creative shifts in brillig, brumeaba negro el sol, and in the turning on the food for broiling. So to 4 minus 0 errors in this translation, we get an index of 50. And we have used this creativity index to measure in several experiments. But creations are not the only thing that we look at when we look at creativity. In psychology as well, they have a lot of classifications, right? You could look at the translator to see if one translator, and they have looked, some people have looked to see if a literary translator is more creative than, say, a technical translator. You can look at creating, the process, collaborations, you can look at the product, the creations, which is possibly the easiest thing to look at because it's something that is there that you can analyze, or how people consume this creativity, something that also Valeria talked about. We are also interested in translation in what the end user thinks is creative or appreciates without knowing that is creative, and curricula. How are we going to train translators to be creative? So I have done work in all these 4 aspects, and today I'm going to present to you only 3. So creations, consumption, and creating, very briefly, because I don't have that much time, and only one will require probably an hour. And for you to have an idea of what we do and how is the funding spent in research. So creations. What we have done with literary text is that we have taken, say, a story. We have done several, but I'm only looking at some here. A story like, in this case, a story called To Be or Not to Be by Kurt Vonnegut. And we have translated this by professionals, always professional translators. And these same translators post-edited the text. And then we also translated this using an empty engine at the time, the state of the art, which was neural, in 2 languages, English to Catalan and English to Dutch. And what we found was that the same translators would have a higher creativity index when translating on their own than when they were post-editing. And they often mention something that it has carried my research, it has inspired my research a lot. They always say that they felt like post-editing, they were in a corset. And I want you to remember this for the end of the findings. So, of course, we show this MT by default. It could be different if translators use MT of their own accord, of course. We have also tested creations by LLMs, the state-of-the-art GPT-4, not 5 like it is now. And we have tried this with different prompting techniques, you know, telling GPT translate or translate creatively, or giving information about the author or the genre, etc. We have varied the temperature. This is the probability of the next token. The highest the temperature, the less probable the term. Therefore, we thought more creative. And we have also tried context level, meaning we feed the LLM 1 sentence or the whole text. And we calculated the creativity index into Catalan, Spanish, Chinese, and Dutch. And this is what we found. Let me walk you through this graphic. You will see in blue all the... Can I point with this? I don't know. But anyway, so you look at 3B has the highest number of creative shifts and the lower number of error points. And this 3B was with only a prompt saying either translate creatively or translate. If we gave more information to the system, it started to decay a little bit. It was worse. The dark blue that is performing the worst is the classic DeepL, not the one that is there now. So it was the DeepL where there was neural, okay? But the gray is the professional translation when translating on their own. And here there is a significant difference between the professionals and the LLMs, with different prompting, with different temperature. It didn't matter what we did. It wasn't even comparable, which surprised me a little bit, not entirely, but a little bit. If you want to see here, you have the best scores by the best setting in GPT-4 and the professional translation. And the professional translation always had a much higher creativity index score. We didn't have a professional translation in Chinese, that's why it's not there. But what about the consumption? Do viewers or readers care what we do as translators, all the effort that we put in a translation? So we took that to the test, but to test this, we use questionnaires. We also use another instrument that I will show later. So we ask different questions, comprehension, the typical, but we use mainly the narrative engagement questionnaire, which is used in communication and media to see the engagement of a user with a content, a creative content. And you see here in the little telephone beside the text that the questions are not, do you like this, or what did you think of the translation, but more immersive questions like, during the program, my body was in the room, but my mind was inside the world created by the story. So then the users have to strongly agree with this or disagree with this. We also ask them if they enjoy, we also ask them about translation. So we tested this with a telenovela, considered by some not to be the high end of audiovisual translation, Te doy la vida, and we tested this in collaboration with some of the people in the room as well. We tested 119 participants, and what we saw is that the engagement was higher with post-editing, but the enjoyment and the translation reception was very similar, the professional with the HT. So this is, again, the same subtitlers working on the two modalities. But then we were a bit curious, why is the engagement so high? So we look at the edit distance between these two translations, so the post-editing and the human, and we found, I don't know if you're familiar with HTER, but it measures the distance between the two. We found that they had made a lot of changes. And this was possibly because we were paying full rate and we were giving them plenty of time. So we wonder what would happen in a professional context where you're paid less and you're given a shorter time because you're post-editing. We also tested this with readers, so 223 frequent readers of Catalan and Dutch with the same Kervonegut story. And we found that the expert readers, so professional translators, always rated the HT, unknowingly, of course, of what they were rating, higher, but the non-expert readers behave differently in the two languages. The Catalan readers definitely presented higher values in HT, but the Dutch presented the highest values in English, because Dutch read a lot in English, more sometimes, especially if the author is an English speaker, of course. So then we wonder, would they have the same reaction if they, if they read from Russian or in translation? So that makes you think that it's not that easy, right? Reception studies, because it depends on the state of that language in the country, for example, Catalan in Spain, or how people read in that country, for example, Dutch in the Netherlands. We also eye-tracked participants. So an eye tracker is a machine that measures the eye movements on the page, say, and there is the eye-mind hypothesis that states that the longer you fixate on a text, the more cognitive effort you are putting on that text. Of course, the cognitive effort could be because there is an error, or it could also be because you're liking it, right? So we always interview people. We do retrospective think-alouds. So we did this. We are still working on reception studies, but we did a small experiment And what we found, and this was interesting for us, I don't know if it's that interesting for everybody, that there was a higher cognitive load in these units of creative potential, regardless if they were solved as creative shifts or reproductions, but people do pay attention to where the author at least has put a lot of effort and where the translators have to decide what to do. But of course, this was a very small exercise, and now we are working on a bigger project that will bring results in the future. So all of this took me on a journey to see, okay, translators say that this is a core set. How do we use technology to enhance creativity? Is there a way? But of course, we cannot do that if we don't know what is the creative process of translators when creating on their own. And this is the creating. This is very, very difficult to do. We are working on this project that is a 5-year project, also funded by the European Research Council for 5 years, and we are on our 2nd year now. And I'm only going to show you a very small part of what we have seen. This is the team in Groningen working on this. There is a postdoc joining soon. And we have all worked on this. And I wanted to first start with what is the creative process. So you saw what was creativity. That was to create something new, or creativity in the product, something new that is also useful. So the process is all the thoughts and actions that go into creating this product. So you have many ways of doing this. You can put a translator in an MRI, very expensive and complex. You can go to a translator's house and ask them, what are you doing? Or you can ask them to talk, a bit invasive. So you can interview them to ask them, and you can also give them some predefined stages and see if they select those stages or not. So what we did is to resort to a creative process report diary and an interview. So this diary has 13 stages. I'm not going to go through all of them. It comes also from psychology, but it has never been used with translators because we don't know how translators create, really. We have some information from Paul Kussmaul, a translation scholar, but very little and only with the students. So these 13 stages have things like definition of the problem. For example, when you are reading the source text and you're evaluating what is problematic, or reflection, when you're reflecting on aspects of the text and you're thinking, how am I going to solve this? Or documentation, when you look at information to try to enlighten your solution. So we also asked them, because we were interested in the emotions and the cognitive effort of translators, because translators often say how much they enjoy being creative and how much they enjoy doing literary and audiovisual translation. So here you have a lot of factors, for example, perfectionism that are more to do with cognition of the translators, or cognitive factors more to do with their personality, optimism, open to risk, etc., or emotional. I was satisfied, I was disappointed, I was stressed. Environmental, that refers to working with others, for example. So we recruited 41 professional translators. This was very difficult. 21 subtitlers and 20 literary translation in this language variation, so Dutch, Spanish, and Catalan from English. And these are very consolidated translators that translate creative content. So let's say at the high end, these are not students and they are not novice. And we needed them to be based in the Netherlands or in Barcelona, because then we are going to eye track them in the second part of the study that I'm not presenting here because it's not done yet, but maybe one day. And we chose a content that was creative enough, that had enough units of creative potential, what I show you in the beginning in the little exercise that you did, But we also wanted it to be copyright free because we tend to put our research open source, not previously translated into Dutch, Spanish, or Catalan, and with a lot of units. So we chose a sitcom and a literary text for the literary translators. And this was the workflow. They fill in a questionnaire with experience, etc. And then the diary was filled in every day of the 5-day duration. We didn't care if that day they didn't work. They had to fill in the diary. They could fill in all the stages, none of the stages, some of the stages, but they had to submit the diary. And then at the end of the 5 days, they uploaded the translation. We asked them how the experiment was, and we also interviewed them. I'm only going to talk here about the diaries, the one part of the diaries, because it's too much data. But I think some of this data you will find interesting, not because it's earth-shattering, but it confirms with instruments what translators tend to say. So what are these stages of the creative process in translation? So you see here the frequency of the stages. So in the x-axis, you see all the stages, and on the y-axis, you see the total selection. The green is above the expected, and the expected is simply all the selections divided by the number of stages. The red is below the expected, and the white, or the ones that are whitish, are close to expected. And what we see here is that the creative process in all these translators involves more frequently understanding the source text, so reflection, searching for information, documentation, having new ideas, the eureka moment, insight, associate different ideas, associative thinking, generate several ideas for a problem, divergent thinking. These are microprocesses of the creative process, and then judge the translation, judgment. And they are significantly higher: reflection, documentation, and judgment. We did a transition analysis as well from what stages go into other stages in those 5 days. And these are also reflection, documentation, and judgment are kind of like the pillars of the stages where all the stages go back and forth from. This is what I thought it was really good. Because you see here in the x-axis, 5 days, and in the y-axis, all the stages. The darker colors means that there is a more frequency of that stage, and the lighter colors, the opposite. And you see here like a diagonal. You start with definition, reflection, documentation, but reflection seems to be quite strong, and then you have something in the middle that are other colors, and then at the end, blue, finalization, and judgment. These are the top stages in each day. So you see that the reflection is constant, but some are more present at the beginning and others more present at the end. So we thought this is the ones that are significantly different across the 5 days. So we thought there is a beginning, middle, and end to the creative process. So then when translators say that post-editing affects their creative process, we can see here in words or with a name that, yeah, because you start at the end with finalization, judgment, and somehow you need to work yourself backwards to what in your creative process is the beginning: definition, reflection, documentation. So it's not something new, but it's nice to see here how clear it is. So yes, we have to test this with post-editing to see how translators resolve this. But do they like resolving this in post-editing? We don't know. When we looked at the factors, so this is a bit daunting, but you see here first cognitive factors, then cognitive, then emotions, and finally environmental. In red, you have the ones that change over the 5 days. And what caught my attention was how high satisfaction is throughout the 5 days. We have done a lot of interviews with translators, with professionals. They really enjoy their work. And you can see it here, right? Okay, there is some disappointment, frustration, and stress, but in professionals, these are quite low. And the surprise factor also goes down, but of course, because in the beginning everything is new, and then you kind of think, okay, this is the way it goes. Optimism is quite high, so the cognitive and cognitive factors are significantly higher than the other ones, but the emotions are quite balanced throughout, which I thought it was, wow, this is interesting, because this is, of course, what translators say, that they enjoy their work. But do they enjoy post-editing? How would these graphics look if we did the same exercise with post-editing, which we will do, but later. So this is a kind of... So to conclude, because I have to leave time for questions, because I started later. What about quality and creativity? So what we can see throughout these 5 years is that errors are not sufficient to capture the quality in highly creative content. There are more things at play, not only for the translators, but also for the users. The professionals have a higher quality and creativity when they work on their own. And professional is a very important word, because the students, we have seen, behave differently, and it's understandably because they are learning. And they do so, they are more creative when they work on their own. The creative stages follow a temporal line, so starting at the end, like post-editing, might affect their creative process, and this is why it feels like a corset. And then users engage with these units of creative potential. They do pay attention to them. And also they appreciate more, they engage more with content that has been either post-edited or professional. They don't engage that well with machine translation. So thank you very much for listening to me. We have a podcast where we interview professional literary and audiovisual translators. So if you want to follow us in Spotify and Apple podcast, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think
No, it was fine. It started a little bit later, so that's fine. It's fine. Yes. Yeah. No. Perfect. Do we have any questions in the room?
Oh. Yes.
Oh, there. Sorry. Yes.
Thank you so much. A delightful experience.
That's nice.
I suppose you know, because you looked at me, but I don't. It was hard to tell from your body language that I am one of the co-authors of that article.
Yes,
that you were citing. Yes. And Jeff Kobe is not here, but I did see him about a week ago in Boston. So I would ask, not to put any pressure, but what about a public debate sometime soon with you and Jeff Kobe, who is the immediate past president of the American Translators Association?
Okay.
And
why debate?
About this broader, narrower question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Which definition is broad and which is narrow, and why? And I think it would be interesting to a handful of people in the world.
I'm up for the challenge, but I think in these 2 days you're all going to discuss this, so maybe we come with more solutions, right? For the debate.
Contact him and see if we could have a live debate over Zoom in the next few days.
Okay. Okay. More work.
Yeah. We have another question here at the front.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a very quick question. What do you expect is the role of the subject matter that's being translated on the satisfaction? You showed the satisfaction is quite high. I think it's probably mostly true in general. Do you expect to see that that differs based on what is being translated?
This is funny that you ask this, because some of the subtitlers thought that the sitcom was not politically correct because it was a sitcom from the 70s that happened in a school in London where there is a lot of misunderstanding between people from different countries. But they still might choose satisfaction to resolve all the puns or the wordplays and all this. And the same thing with the, I think with the literary, maybe most of them did like the text. But I think there is a difference between liking the text and being satisfied with your solution. So it's funny that you said that, because some said, I don't like this, because it was very politically incorrect at times, because it's from the 1970s, which also takes me to something about creativity that is wonderful, that as a translator, what do you do then? Because do I keep the words that were used in the 70s? Do I upgrade it to now for these audiences? So we make these decisions all the time, but this kind of feeds our juices. The gray cells, wasn't Poirot that said that? Mm-hmm. The gray cells, so there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and we have another question over here.
The mic's not on, I'm afraid.
On.
Hello. How do you identify exactly the units of creative potential? Or maybe, let's mirror it, what defines something that is not a unit of creative potential? How do you exclude them?
So we usually work with annotators and we give them a list of possible units, metaphors, idioms, play on words, even cultural references are included, or even treatment, you and you in different languages. This is resolved in a dialogue differently. Names of characters, sometimes these are translated. So that would be the annotators know, and they can add some of their own. The ones that are non-routine are the units, and the ones that are routine, that they don't present any immediate problem, they are not marked. But this is interesting as well. I have always a follow-up too. Because it's like a child, when they draw a sun, they are very happy with their first sun, but maybe you say, well, we are not going to the National Gallery with your son. But for that person, it's a creative moment. So it might not be original for us, but it's original for the person. So in translation, creativity for a student might be, non-routine, but a professional has a different definition of what is routine. And the annotators also need to be with a certain level. So crowdfunding and, like sometimes you see things, it's a bit tricky, because then you would underline units that are not really complicated for a professional. For example, translators of these pieces, they normally don't say, I couldn't translate this. It's a standard for them, So very interesting.
Okay, thank you. Well, we had one question over there as well, and we'll have to soon wrap up.
Yes. So my question is talking about expectations and also in the wake of AI. So,
raise your hand.
Sorry?
Where are you?
Oh, here I am. Yeah. So we did talk about expectations. What we did is we dissected the creative process.
Yes.
And the thing is, given the wake of AI and creativity is sort of a human trait, is there a possibility that we could rebuild again a program that we could train translators on creativity, so we guarantee that this process is followed through, or we could just use something to prepare them in a way that they remain as human and as creative as ever?
I think a lot of universities do this, right? They train translators in the creative process. So, for example, a lot of translation scholars will train students on give diverse translations for one source, the more you use some skills. We have written a little bit about training, so I'm not going to, I could get into this for hours, but there are certain skills, flexibility, fluency, that you can encourage to the students or in the students. I am a firm believer that we need to go back to writing with the emergence of Gen AI and teach students to write better. Because this also makes them understand what is creative and why what they are translating is not a cliche like Gen AI might produce, but is something original. But if you don't do it yourself, can you really embody it, like the definition by the scholars here, can you really embody this text? I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think just the last, I'll take just one question from Slido as well, which was why just keep it to literary and audiovisual, and why not expand to, it was...
Technical,
yes,
or scientific, yeah. And I'm willing. Give me funding and I will do everything. But you need to, and I know, here I'm looking, I'm showing something that has taken years to do, very slow, with quite a number of people, but still not enough, of course. So you are all welcome to replicate this. We have all the instruments open source in other types of text. But my interest was in literary translation and audiovisual because I think I am a creative person. So I love books. So my interest was, and that was my first question, why do I buy this translation and not this one? Why do I like this translator and not this one? Because both are error-free, presumably. Not always, but presumably. And that is the factor that I wanted to capture. So, but yes, I think there is creativity, maybe less units, and just a short thing. We have tested documents that have less units, and then the gap between post-editing, human translation, and machine translation is shorter. The more creative the text, the more the gap. So that's why we also wanted to see this gap. And I have to go now,
yes,
right?
thank you, but thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you so much.